So I am delighted to say that General Sir Nick Carter recently joined our board at Apolitical, and we are thrilled to have such an extraordinary thinker and problem solver bringing his skills and insights to our organization. For those of you who don't know of Nick, I'm going to embarrass him by sharing a short introduction. Nick Carter was, until recently, Chief of the Defence Staff in the UK, Principal Military Advisor to the Prime Minister, Secretary of State for Defence and the National Security Council, and the head of the UK Armed Forces, to mention just a few. Nick is also a noted reformer and was named a gender champion for his work on inclusivity. Nick, we wanted to introduce you to the apolitical community, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions today.
I mean, I think I learnt in my time as head of the armed forces, and in a sense, when you do that role, you're very much acting as a bit of an international diplomat on behalf of the country, that if we can help governments govern better, then the world will be a much more secure, stable and prosperous place. And I think we're living through an era which is very reminiscent of the 1930s at the moment, when it's never been more important to have stable and good governance. And I think what made me feel that Apolitical was a very worthy cause to be involved in was the extent to which we operate on the basis of trying to help public servants and those who work for governments to become better public servants. And I think that's a very proper and worthy thing to be doing. So I felt it resonated with my values, it resonated with my experience, and it resonated with the sort of world that I want to live in, and in particular, I want my children and my grandchildren to live in. So that was what attracted me to it. I mean, it's obviously an interesting business as well, but I like the fact that it's a business that sits in a worthy context. I mean, one of the things I learned throughout my military career, and particularly as head of the army, is that there is a risk, I think, in the modern world that leaders tend to look upwards rather than downwards. And by that, I mean, they're always seeking personal recognition from those that they serve above them, when actually leadership is all about how you serve those who lead below you and who you lead. And indeed, the motto at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, which trains all of the officers for the British Army, is serve to lead. So to my mind, leadership is all about what you do for the people who are below you and who work for you. Now that means you have to understand them, to know them, and therefore to care for them. And if you do all of that, there's a sporting chance that you might be able to identify those that can be genuinely empowered. Much of what we do is fundamentally about unlocking people's potential to be empowered in order to be able to seize the sorts of fleeting opportunities that you see in a much more dynamic and complex world than the one that I probably grew up in. So for me, it's all about realizing people's potential. It's about maximizing people's potential. We often get hung up on words like diversity and inclusion and all those sorts of things. Actually, when you get to the nub of it, it's about maximizing everybody's potential, their own individual potential for the good of the whole. And that, to my mind, is what a leader does. A genuine leader is about maximizing the potential of all those people who work for that leader. Well, I think I'd encapsulate them rather sort of quaintly in 3 A's, in no particular order. The first one, I think, is that governments in this very complex world we live in need to have allies and alliances, and they need to be operating with those allies and alliances to achieve common purposes, common ends. The second thing I think that governments need is to be agile and adaptable, because this world is forever changing. And that means you can't be set in your ways. You've got to find ways of adapting in order to be able to realize the opportunities, but also to meet the threats and challenges of today. And then I think the final part of it for me is they've got to have an appetite for integration. No longer is it possible to produce solutions that simply come from government. It will only work if you actually incorporate the private sector, academia, and all of the various instruments of national power together to achieve the effect. And we saw that during COVID, when it was a combination of government, the private sector, academia, that found a route through the life science challenges that were necessary to get a vaccine in place. So to my mind, the world we now live in is one where one has got to integrate. And therefore, you've got to have that appetite to integrate. It's not about government standing apart and simply thinking that everything will happen around it. It's got to integrate. It's got to bring everything together as an enterprise. So allies, agility and adaptability, and then I think an appetite to integrate will make great government.
Fantastic. Thank you for making it seem so simple and elegant. Nick, we are already enjoying working with you and much looking forward to continuing to work together in the future, and very grateful to have you on board our journey.